It happened a few years ago when I decided to travel across the country on a shoestring budget. I was young, adventurous, and naive, convinced that the world was full of friendly strangers eager to help. My plan was simple: hitchhike from one city to another, relying on the kindness of passing drivers. Most of the trip went smoothly, until one particular ride left me shaken to the core. I was standing by the roadside in the middle of nowhere, holding up my thumb and a sign that read, "Next town, please." The day was hot, the road empty, and my patience wearing thin. Just as I began considering walking to the next town, a beat-up old sedan pulled over. The driver, a man in his 50s with graying hair and a rough, weathered face, leaned over and asked where I was headed. I told him my destination, and he nodded. "Hop in," he said. His voice was calm but flat, almost too monotone. Something about him made me hesitate, but I brushed it off, thinking I was just being overly cautious. After all, he was offering a free ride, and I couldn't afford to be picky. As I climbed into the passenger seat, I noticed the car's interior smelled faintly of gasoline and something else I couldn't quite place. The seats were covered in old stains, and the dashboard was cluttered with odd trinkets, rusty tools, a broken flashlight, and a small stuffed animal that looked eerily out of place. At first, the ride was uneventful. He asked me a few generic questions: where I was from, why I was traveling, and if I often hitchhiked. His tone remained even, almost too calm, as if he wasn't really interested in my answers. I tried to keep the conversation light, but something about his demeanor made me uneasy. Then, things started to get strange. After about 20 minutes on the road, he began taking turns onto smaller, less traveled roads. At first, I thought he was just avoiding traffic, but soon I realized we were heading deeper into the countryside, away from any towns or main highways. "Is this the right way to my destination?" I asked, trying to sound casual. He glanced at me briefly before replying, "Shortcut. Trust me." His voice was calm, but his eyes lingered on me for a moment too long. A chill ran down my spine. I glanced at my phone, but there was no signal. The car's old radio crackled faintly, but no music played. The silence between us became suffocating. As we drove further into the remote countryside, I noticed something unsettling. He kept glancing at me out of the corner of his eye. His grip on the steering wheel was tight, his knuckles white. I tried to make small talk to ease the tension, but he gave short, clipped answers. Then, he asked me a question that made my stomach drop. "Do you believe in fate?" he said, his voice unusually soft. I laughed nervously, unsure how to respond. "I guess so." "Why?" He didn't answer immediately, just kept staring at the road ahead. Then he muttered, almost to himself, "Sometimes you meet people for a reason. Sometimes you don't know what that reason is until it's too late." Panic began to bubble up inside me, but I tried to stay calm. "What do you mean by that?" I asked, forcing my voice to stay steady. He didn't respond. Instead, he pulled the car over on a deserted stretch of road, surrounded by dense woods. My heart was pounding as I gripped the door handle, ready to bolt if I needed to. "I need to check something in the trunk," he said, his voice flat. Without waiting for a reply, he got out of the car and walked around to the back. My instincts screamed at me to run, but I hesitated, frozen by fear. I watched as he opened the trunk, his movements slow and deliberate. Then, to my horror, he began rummaging through what looked like a pile of ropes and tools. That was it. I threw the door open and bolted into the woods, my heart racing. I didn't look back, afraid of what I might see. I ran blindly through the trees, branches scratching my arms and face. Eventually, I found a dirt road and followed it until I reached a farmhouse, where a kind older couple helped me contact the police. When the officers arrived, they told me I was lucky to have escaped. The man's car was found abandoned later that night, but he was never caught. The police wouldn't tell me much, but they hinted that he might have been connected to other disappearances in the area. To this day, I shudder to think about what might have happened if I hadn't trusted my instincts and run. That ride taught me to be far more cautious and to always listen to the little voice in the back of my mind that says, something isn't right.